I'm a professional editor and I've always wanted to expand my horizons by talking to other editors and sound designers, music composers, visual effects supervisors, essentially all the magicians who silently and invisibly work behind the scenes. This series is an attempt to make the invisible artists visible. I hope you enjoy the conversations.
Hi, and welcome to The Finest Cut. My guest today is a very accomplished music composer who's worked across advertising, documentaries, feature films, short films, and he's also an independent musician. Ram, welcome to my podcast.
Thank you for having me, Antara. It's a pleasure to be here.
I wanted to have this conversation firstly because all the aspects of post production, not just editing, but all aspects music, sound design, visual effects are, I find, very fascinating subjects for me, to talk about. And which is why I had started this podcast in the first place. So I want to ask you something that I kind of ask all my guests because it's something I'm trying to resolve in my own head in some capacity. How do you choose a project that you want to work on, considering there's so much now with OTT and stuff, there's so many kinds of projects coming your way, I'm sure. How are you choosing what you want to work on?
So the first criterion is who's the producer. Second is who is the director. And the third is how good is the script. So it's down to that. I mean, in 9 times out of 10 nowadays, especially, I tend to know who the producer is personally.
Yeah.
And in terms of the directors and the writers, I think by and large, that conversation also kind of, it's among the more fun conversations we have. So that is something that I really look forward to that process. My biggest issue is when I don't have access to writers and directors, when I have to talk only to producers.
Right.
That's generally when I tend not to take it up in the first place.
Because that kind of creatively shuts you out of that discussion.
Yeah. And also, it kind of gives you the idea that this is a project. It's not so much,
Yes, it's not a creative endeavor.
That's right. Yeah. So the जब नियति खराब है तो आपको थोड़ा दूर ही रहना चाहिए. So that kind of situation is what you end up seeing. But I think now it's quite a different industry we're in. A lot of the times, the relationships are extremely informal and very open. So it's a huge relief where we are right now. In terms of whom we're talking to, musically, of course, things have gotten very, very, very different. So that's a different conversation. Yeah, we'll get there.
Right. So tell me something. We spoke about director, producer, the script. How much of these these decisions are informed by ideology? Because I'm asking because we live in such polarized times. And as I said, there are all kinds of projects that come our way. How many of these decisions are informed by your ideology?
Look, I think our sacred duty, first and foremost, is to entertain. And I work with people of all ideologies and all stratas, because the thing is, for me, the crucial thing is to have intellectual humility, to say, okay, this is my opinion. You're entitled to your opinion. And we can, politics is one aspect of life. It's not, a lot of people, for them, it's all consuming. For me, it's not. I can be friends with people of extremely diverse political opinions. I can even disagree with them. But that's one aspect on which we disagree. If I find somebody to be creatively, a kindred spirit, I'll happily work with them. I'm not so emotionally invested in that. But for me, what is very, very important is that we are on the same page creatively. Because if we're not on the same page creatively, then it doesn't matter what our ideology is, beyond a certain point. You just not get along. You won't be able to get anywhere. So that to me is and also, to be very honest with you, I feel that, a lot of the times, if you work with people from only your point of view, you tend to get into an echo chamber,
Yeah.
So it's better to meet people with all kinds of diverse and different opinions, and to work with people of different who have different opinions from you. It's perfectly okay. It's a free world. That's one of the beauties of the world. Why would we want to narrow it down? The multiplicity of opinions is also what makes art subjective. So the very nature of art will be contradicted if we start choosing people on the basis of purely an ideology.
Right. And how, once, let's say now you've agreed to work on a project, you start work even before, like, let's say the people have started shooting. Do you get into the prep aspect of it?
Yeah, sometimes depends on the kind of project it is. Like, for example, I think on Talash, I ended up writing the score pretty much. I think a lot of the themes were written before the shoot. But Delhi Belly was not like that. Fukre was not like that. So, I mean, it just depends on the project. A lot of the times what happens is that, the nature of the project itself changes at the edit. I mean, the nature of the film itself changes, and I'm saying project also because sometimes what happens is if you've signed a particularly ambitious film, and I'm talking about commercially, if it's a big budget film or there's a lot riding on it, then you start off with the film, but you end up with the project. And that I think is something that I've seen, really, that's really where I think, the editor also plays the role of a psychologist, and the editor shoulders a lot of that fear that comes into a project when the stakes are rising and everybody wants everything to cut really fast, and there's no therav, there's no room for any character to breathe. And people don't understand that actually every project finds its ideal duration. There's every edit tends to find its ideal duration, and that actually feels right. But it takes a certain amount of maturity to accept that. Now, sometimes we're at loggerheads. So what happens is, sometimes I've worked on films where I've done a lot of the score before the shoot and during the shoot. Everybody sent me emails also saying, "Wow, we played it on set. It was incredible. We shot this action sequence to this music, and everybody was amazing." On the edit table, none of it has been kept.
Right.
It's all been discarded because the nature of the film itself has changed.
Yeah.
So that's why sometimes it can be a bit counterproductive, to start working particularly early, because you can tire yourself out. So, and also what happens is you're working on kind of, you're second guessing yourself. You're working on instincts or by reference.
Yeah.
And I don't have a problem with reference, but the thing is that, if you are trying to simulate a reference track, then what you're trying to do is you're trying to retain the spirit of that reference track. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to retain the spirit of that vibe and build on that. Now, the beautiful thing about India is that, in the garb of Indianizing any international theme, you actually can change it quite radically. You can change it quite a bit. So that's the good part of it. The minute you take out a violin and replace it with a sarangi, it's already like radically different. So that's wonderful. But I find the most satisfying part of score is when you are actually working back and forth with an editor and kind of going back and forth. So you give the editor some themes, and the editor also feels like, okay, we're working with new material as opposed to working with references.
Yeah.
Then you go back and forth a bit and find a sweet spot.
Yeah. It's just, I find it's really unfortunate because I struggle with this a lot. And one would like to have that jugalbandi with sound and music and edit and music and edit and sound. But it's such a fight now, particularly with the kind of schedules that we are given to find that right, to hit the sweet spot, so to speak, with all the departments. What is... when you receive reference tracks, as you said, do you listen to them or you mute them entirely? What's your process?
I do not mute them. I listen to them. I listen to them very intently so that I don't end up making the same thing.
Interesting.
Okay, so that's the first thing. And the second thing is that actually it's a very important emotional reference of what the editor and director have in mind. So if there's something that is striking a cue over there, I have to respect it and I have to understand what that is. So once I understand that, and once I've kind of imbibed what the spirit of that reference track is, then I mute it and I do my own thing. But again, I mean, for me, the magic of score also is being able to write thematically, to be able to flesh out themes for characters. Some of them can be abstract themes, some of them can be more obvious themes, but that is, I think, the most pleasurable aspect. Now, so a lot of the times what I tend to do is I'll write the themes for the characters without the reference, and then I'll use the outfit, like, I'll use the arrangement of the reference to decorate that particular theme that I've written. So melodically, I know I'm completely on my own ground.
Right.
But in terms of arrangements, then, and in terms of that kind of spirit, tempo, mood, texture, flavor, I'll use that from the, I'll kind of take those ideas from the reference.
And how are you? So this is interesting when you say that you are almost sort of scripting a theme for characters. How are you doing this? Like, what about the character? It's obviously the character's larger arc that's informing that kind of theme. What's your process when you're doing something like that?
So I look, for me, the only way that film I enjoy film is when I feel that there are at least two things working simultaneously, two emotions, two motivations, and there's that tension. There's tension between those ideas, and I like it when we show more than we tell. So the big problem with music right now is also, it's especially today, it's all kind of Mickey Mouse. It's like, okay, happy music, sad music, and that I don't enjoy that. So I like to be able to work with two emotions kind of simultaneously. So for me, it's text and subtext, and a lot of the times it is what is there and then what is under the surface. So for example, if there's a character who's like, like, for example, I'll give you a simple example of a character like Vijay Raz's character, Cowboy in Delhi Belly. Now his score is like, there's a certain coolness to it, but also the thing is, there's also a slowness to him because of the fact that he's a dopey guy. I mean, he reacts, everything he does is like he takes a 3-second pause before he actually responds. So there's a bit of a dopey guy there, and there's a proper kind of delay in the way that he reacts. So I personally felt that the very important thing that we have to be able to kind of convey through this entire music is that this guy actually, this whole thing that is happening to him is a disruption of his regular routine. So there's an irritation. So you have to feel a sense of his irritation. So for me, like, his reference was Lee Van Cleef's theme from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Okay.
So because the thing is, if you watch The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Lee Van Cleef he just looks very inconvenienced. He looks very irritated. He's the bad, but he's also like the mad, he's just bugged. And there's the hero who's like, who's totally cool. And there's the ugly who's like this kind of vibrating chaos element. So for me, I mean, I look at it from that angle. I'm looking at it from the angle of what is happening and how is this particular character feeling, what is happening to them emotionally. And I try and get that into the score if I can, so that there is a second layer at which something is happening where it's not obvious. It's not obvious.
Yeah. So it's not indicative music per se. Yeah. Interesting.
It's not.
Right. Also, so then when you're working on a film, you're also sort of hemmed in by the director, producer, notes, feedback. And because I know sometimes it does get to me, because our default is to do our own thing. but obviously we can't. How
Yeah.
do you, and you're also an independent musician where you're doing your own thing and making your own tracks as per what you want. Does it bother you? And how do you kind of find your freedom within, those kind of boundaries?
Yeah, look, it's a nightmare. The thing is, the most um, blood curdling aspect of our job is when we have to show our work for the first time to anyone.
Oh God, yes.
Because the thing is, you've been working in your own little kind of silo. So actually, what I have started doing now is I have started ripping off the band-aid earlier and earlier. So I have started sharing my work with my producers and my directors earlier and earlier,
Yeah.
so that the reaction and the amount of time that I have invested in that particular thing is a little lesser. So that actually is I wish I had learned this earlier, and I would advise anybody who's upcoming that don't worry about getting it absolutely finished. Please share WIPs and
Yeah.
get feedback. It's important because it'll save you a lot of mental grief. I mean, a lot of emotional your emotional
Yeah.
health will be way better.
I hear you.
Yeah, so that's one thing. Now the outside of that, I feel that I actually love the process. I mean, the problem is that, I mean, it's like kind of jumping off a cliff. So once you've jumped off the cliff, what happens is, have you ever skydived?
No.
Okay, so when you skydive, the first thing that happens is, the first, and what they invariably do is, you're standing on the edge of the door, on this little ledge outside the door of the plane, and they'll always tell you that, jump at 3, and they push you on 2.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So what happens is, you lose that first 10 or 12 seconds is harrowing, because you lose your breath and you can't breathe, and you're literally just free falling. And that first breath you get back is like a rebirth. It's unbelievable. It is absolutely incredible. So actually, it's the same thing with what we do, which is that, you have to take that leap and you have to jump out of the plane. You have to anyways. That's what our job is.
Yeah.
But the minute you've jumped out, actually what happens is the most painful part is over. That initial section of like, oh my God, like, have I mean, or do I know music at all, or am I a complete nincompoop? And maybe I should have taken up another profession, and all that shit goes through your brain. And then what happens is, then you settle down and and it happens to this day. It's horrific.
Yeah.
That feeling. But that is actually your ally. Once that is over, then you can settle down and you are free to make more mistakes, and you're free to make many more wrong decisions, and whatever else it takes to be able to reach that point where everybody's kind of in sync, everybody's in agreement.
Yeah.
So I one of the things that I really started doing now is I start sketching really fast. I sketch my themes out. I sketch my score out. So I pretty much finished, like, for example, when we worked on Ratrani, my initial time to finish the score was 2 days. Yeah, I literally wrote the score in 2 days, because what happens is that I write the themes. So because I'm writing the themes, I'm not worried about the edit and it's sitting on the edit.
Yeah.
Because I know we'll go back and forth.
Yeah.
But I need to know whether I'm on the right track with Shonali, and I need to know whether I'm on the right track with Ishita and with you. So we all need to feel comfortable that this is the right score. Yeah. And I need to get that feeling. I mean, like, for example, so many times when we were working, say on Rais, I was working with Deepa, the editor, and Deepa would send me feedback saying that, hey man, listen, I think earlier themes that you had written, which we shot to, I think those are more emotionally resonant. These ones are feeling, forced, like they're feeling filmy, like, can we get back some of that? Because these guys don't, right now they're not realizing it, because they're in the middle of the second schedule. But while I'm assembling it, I'm feeling like, we're going a little off where we started out. So then that feedback is crucial for me.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So I will take that feedback. And this is completely outside of what Rahul and Ritesh and Farhan and all are telling me. This is just the editor and me talking.
Yeah.
And that feedback then also matters. So I will bring that on board, make it right, because at the end of the day, nobody has a more kind of bird's eye view, and the up close and personal view than the editor.
Yeah.
So it's best to take that opinion on board and kind of work with that as well. I did that a lot, even on a film. As I mean, it was the score was an absolute delight to work on, because it was such an absurdly bizarre film that was Fukre. It was such an insane film, and it made so little sense when you were watching it, that working on it was a delight because of that, because of the fact that I had a great relationship with the editor. We can go back and forth, and Mrig himself also has a very strong say on the montages, of how he likes the montages to be cut. So I would literally, I mean, and every film comes to you differently. Like, for example, on Fukre, I got the first I got the walking montages first. I got 4 walking montages. I don't know. They mean nothing. It's just these idiots in Delhi walking around. And tonally, it was so good, because for me, I got to see Delhi. I got to see these characters and these losers walking around. And I got to be able to calibrate a certain kind of tone, and a certain kind of tempo. Right. So there's good stuff that comes out of any information that you can get as early as possible. So WIPs are great.
Which makes sense, actually, because even I think if one can, I've done this on a few projects, I think we can do more of this, is probably start pushing out even WIP edits to the music composer.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, even if they're like rough lineups, I think it just helps everyone to get on board earlier rather than
for
later.
Sure. The only thing I would tell composers who are working with WIP edits is, do not worry about sync. Don't start hard syncing changes and hard syncing changeovers and shifts according to that particular edit. Write your themes, use it for themes, use it for a general sense of tempo, and provide an editor. Normally what you end up making like 3 minutes of music. I would say, like, just jam on it. It can be 6.5, 7 minutes of music, doesn't matter. You're giving the editor something to work with.
Yeah. Also, speaking of when you're spotting music and to the cut, what is the process you're following? So you've got your themes and you've got a general tone of where you're headed. What's the process for spotting music?
So I sit with the director, and we spot the entire film, and we get where we want music, where we don't want music, all of those notes. Invariably, that happens in the edit suite only. So the editor is also involved in that. But what I always inform my director and my editor is that I'm going to give you an excess of music, because it's much easier for me to mute music than it is to have to insert it in later. So sometimes what happens is, you just want to keep one voice from that entire bunch of music. Sometimes you want to thin it out, or you want to use just one thing, or something like that, and it helps for it to be there. Yeah. And we can just keep eliminating as we go. If it's if it's not necessary, just mute it.
Yeah. Also, so typically I find that the kind of content we are making, the films or series that we are making, there's very little space and breathing and therao, as you said earlier, right? So, and obviously you would imagine music would flourish only when there is therao. How are you able to spot music when there's so much? It's just packed with dialogue, right? It's just dialogue after dialogue after dialogue, because we are cutting so tight nowadays. How are you managing and working your way around that?
Yeah, so there's 2 techniques actually. One is that I tend not to. I write a theme and I write a secondary theme. So what I do is the secondary theme will not be as busy as the main theme. So what I'll do is, invariably the secondary theme is what will play under the dialogue, unless it's a teaser or a trailer where you need the main theme through and through and through. But otherwise what will happen is, invariably I'll take out the main theme, so that the secondary theme is what is playing under the dialogue, and you get a sense of what the main theme is. But it's a slightly more abstracted version of that theme that is playing under. So if you've heard the theme, subconsciously that theme is playing in your head when you're hearing this. So I don't need to play it on the score. Otherwise, what happens is, if the theme is playing, you will not listen to the dialogue.
Right.
It's too much. It's like listening to a song in the middle of a dialogue. It's too melodically strong. So that is one thing that I've started doing. And the other is, I mean, there's two huge issues. One is that there's a wall to wall carpet music.
Yes.
There's no silences.
Yeah.
And the second is, and the weird thing is, music works on in points and out points. Like, the most important thing that we have to figure out is where the music comes in and what the music does and when does it leave.
Yeah.
Invariably what happens is it's music comes in and doesn't leave. It's just there and there and there.
Yeah.
So I think that is a huge issue where it's a serious conversation with the producers. And you have to sit them down and tell them that, hey guys, listen, what's happening is that, there's a sameness and you're not realizing it. But after you watched, say, two hours of a film, or you watch 3 episodes of a web series, you will realize that it's grating on your nerves. You're hearing it too much. So we need to slim it down. So for example, on Talash, I had no problems doing that. I had no problems because Reema is she's so clear as a director, and Excel and Amir as producers. Amir especially is he's very specific about where the music should be and where the music shouldn't be. But on a film like Race, it was really, really, really tough because it's literally carpet wall to wall music. I think there's maybe like 4 or 5 minutes of silence in the whole film. There's that much music. So that was really like, it was an exercise in kind of keeping the interest value going. So every theme in Race, I had to write 2-3 versions of it, because otherwise it would become so annoying by the time you've reached an hour, because you're hearing the same thing repeating over and over again.
Yeah.
So that is, so like, for example, I'll tell you what I mean by a theme and a sub theme. So the heart of the Race theme is there's this pulse that goes, and then there's a trumpet that comes on top of that goes. Now, if that trumpet kept coming, I mean, it would drive you mad, So as much as possible, we would do and then cover that with score. So it's kind of like an undercurrent as opposed to being an obvious theme. It's more like a riff, like a guitar riff, or it can be like a banjo riff or a mandolin riff. So different ways of kind of reinventing that idea and then doing versions of it. So, and then you write a longer version of the theme. So you write like 3 parts to a theme. So it's not just one thing. Now, the big problem with what happens in India is that, invariably producers understand, that's the theme. This has to keep, no, that can't be the theme. It's harrowing. It's too short. It's like mnemonic, It's what should play at the end of a commercial. It's not, it's not a theme. So you have to allow it to grow. That can come back, and then you go somewhere else. So that's how you build a theme. So you have a lot to work with. Even on the edit, you have something to be able to kind of you have something to build towards. Even in a scene or a montage or whatever, you have something to build towards. So that is, I think, that's also the art of kind of writing. But in terms of what you're talking about, which is specifically writing music for films that have a lot of dialogue, I think the only way out is to be able to, like what we discussed, which is that as far as possible, write an abstraction of the main theme and keep that going.
Heavy dialogues is one part of it that you're fighting as a composer. There's also the loudness of dialogues and music. And this is a discussion I've been reading about a lot lately. Internationally as well, that people are really questioning, why are we mixing at such high levels where dialogue and music are kind of fighting each other to be heard? So I wanted to get some insight on this from you.
Look, the thing is, it's something that's been building for a while, because for example, I remember the first time that I really noticed it, I think was probably, it happened to me in Inception, where it got to me, where I was like, hang on, I'm not able to understand. I can't hear a word of what anybody's saying. And the music is so loud, and so is the design. And, it's all kind of like overwhelming. Now the thing with that is, I think you're looking for impact. You're looking for, that kind of wallop to be able to get that kind of, and um, just that hair, that goosebump moment. But the thing is that I think, it comes down to design. It really comes down to design. Like I remember watching a documentary on how, when they started scoring the Star Wars movies, I'm talking about the first ones, where you're talking about Randy Thomas, sound designer, and John Williams as a composer, and people like Walter Murch involved in the edit. There was a very clear demarcation that they would make on where exactly, what kind of, it was also, a lot of it was frequency based. So for example, if it was, okay, this is going to be dialogue heavy, then the dialogue frequencies, you can't score them, you have to leave them out. And you have to but the thing is also, those days, one of the advantages you had is that a locked edit stayed locked.
Yes.
Because it was all analog, you couldn't keep changing your edit. Today you can keep changing your edit. So what happens with that is that also there's a state of chaos towards the end of the mix, which is this scene was designed one way and it ends up sounding like something else. I think the one filmmaker who's finally, I think, to some extent gotten it right, I think, is Denis Villeneuve in his last two films. I mean, I'm talking about the blockbuster style movies. Both Blade Runner 2049 and Dune had they had better designed sequences.
Sure. And also texturally, you could actually hear textures, sound textures as well.
Exactly, and those omnithopters going over the desert, you could hear the omnithopter sound. And for me, I must tell you, like, my favorite film for reference of modern sound and how to do modern sound design is still Apocalypse Now.
For sure.
It's just the greatest, and it's like there is a score, and there are amazing moments of, like, of found music and placed music and all of that stuff. Ride of the Valkyries, for an example, or This Is the End, just brilliantly designed, because of the fact that you have somebody like Walter Murch at the helm, who understands both video and audio at such a profound level, that that you kind of reach this beautiful blend of music, sound design, and kind of and songs and all of that stuff. So I feel that it's been done. It's just I think the volume wars need to calm down. There needs to be this sense of, okay, now this particular sequence, if people are going to be talking, you can't have bombastic music. Also, I think what happens is, a lot of the times different theaters have different speaker calibrations. So, say, for example, in India, I find certain theaters have the surround speakers quite high, and the score that is going there is actually not meant to be that high. But it's been wrongly calibrated. So it's, it can drive you a bit mad. Then there is another problem of, like, we're working in 5.1, but we're mixing for 7.2, sometimes 7.1, 7.2, 11.2. So it's I personally feel that the best thing to do is to stick to kind of classic principles.
Right.
What worked 25 years ago is still true and is still good. And there's a sensibility that has to be right.
Yeah, I think it's interesting what you say. And again, going back to what we said, that if there is a sort of marriage of sound and music and edit, that's really the ideal scenario. Where I've seen, I think I was watching Grey Man, and they had the good thing about the film. I think I wasn't particularly excited by the film itself, but I felt some of how the sound design kind of fed into the music and vice versa. In terms of the rhythm of certain sound effects that fed into the rhythm of the music. I thought that was really interesting. But of course, that also comes with working forward, then working backward with each other.
Actually, that's a very interesting example you brought up, because actually the Russos are very good at that. Also because they work with with an old school composer like Alan Silvestri,
Hmm.
who's kind of much more orchestral and much more
Yeah.
into a classic orchestral vibe. So that's the reason why, actually, it's why actually, film watching for people like you and me is so different um, it's so different from just watching it as a normal audience, because for us, we can sometimes watch an appalling film and learn something
Yeah.
profoundly important for us. And uh, the Gray Man is one of those. It's one of those films where there's a lot to learn from the craft. And I think that it's the same thing with the Russos and the films, especially that film that they did, I think the second Captain America. It's beautifully
Yeah.
designed, especially that there's I think there's one fight sequence in an airport. It's just beautifully designed, even in terms of sound, because there's so much dialogue. It's really well done. So they get it right. And also because
Yeah.
I think when you're working with classic orchestral elements,
Yeah.
there's a certain kind of separation that you get.
But see, this what which brings me to my next question, that we're speaking orchestral elements, but when you're working within the ambit of our post-production budgets, and I've seen this myself, that a lot of times on smaller budget films and all, you don't actually have the opportunity to go in for orchestras, for live orchestras, and you're resorting to instrument software. So, how, I mean, obviously, it's not a great situation to be in, but do you look at it as a sort of favorable compromise, or what is your approach to something like that, a situation like that?
Okay, so I have three fundamental rules that I follow. Is I try and keep nothing in the center speaker. If we're doing 5.1, I try and keep my score purely quadraphonic, which is LR and LS and RS and subwoofer. So I leave the center speaker completely free. Now, besides that, the other way to look at it is these are just tools.
Hmm.
They're just tools, and the tool is not making the music. It's the person behind the tools. So I mean, I remember marveling at early Rahman work, with the way that the command he had over the technology that he was using, and how it can be at the end of the day, the most profoundly simple is genius. And that is, I think, what is missing today, is that a lot of the times we're trying to be clever, and we're trying to be in the need to try and feel clever and complex. We end up complicating things, and it ends up sounding messy. So I think the first thing I always think about is how much time do I have, and
Hmm.
therefore how do I keep it clean? How can I keep it clean? It needs to be clean. When you're when you're listening to it at home, you have to. It has to feel like it was all seamless. And to me, the most seamless scores are the toughest ones. Like, for
Yeah.
example, I'll tell you, one of my favorite scores is Howard Shore's score for Silence of the Lambs, and
Oh,
nobody knows the score.
yeah.
Nobody knows. Like, there's
Yeah. That's so true.
no nobody's ever heard of the score,
Right.
and it's because, but if you watch the film without the score, it falls flat, because the terror in that score
So
is
it's
absolutely
subliminal, it's just working at a subliminal level.
totally and at a psychological level. And the way it's
Hmm.
cueing Hannibal is
Yeah.
incredible, because he comes so late in the film, but it's actually foreshadowing his presence through the film. So there's a reveal of his theme that keeps happening, When they talk about him, there's a theme, and they pick that up actually kind of from Apocalypse Now, where the Colonel Kurt's theme actually comes the first time they start talking about him, but you don't hear it actually. You hear it in all its glory towards the end of the film, and that is, for me, that is great score. Great score is when you are cueing something subliminally
Yeah.
and subconsciously,
Yeah.
and the audience doesn't know it's happening, but it's actually great storytelling.
Yeah, and I think that applies to edit sound and music. that I think they work best when they're all seamless, subliminal. But unfortunately, I think because of that, we're also they're so subliminal that we are given very little importance.
That's true. That is true.
In terms of production, of course.
That is true.
I wanted to know, so when we're talking about composing as per the duration of the film, I'm going to specifically talk about the film we worked on together, which is Ratrani. What I loved after you had done your music pass is that seamlessness, that and because there's a progression in the character, and you had literally half an hour to build a progression and go to a song, like a full-blown song at the end of the film. And that progression was so seamless. So I wanted to ask you, what was your approach when you were working on the film?
First of all, thank you for that. I think the magic of it, of working on Ratrani, was the fact that we were also well versed with the script. So, and we knew that the song was there at the end. We had to build up to the song, but the lovely part is her finding her feet. So the subliminal part of the score was that the initial part of the score has to sound like it's got no bass. So what's happening is that actually she's not rooted. So as the score builds, I keep kind of adding the bass to the score, to her theme, and ground it and root it more as it goes. So there is a sense of building, but you're not building that way. You're actually building putting her on more and more solid ground as you go. So it's very subliminal. It's something that if you hear back now, you'll get that. Like the opening has very little bass in it. It's all kind of airy and fluff, and her manic, beautiful energy. This kind of this firefly of a girl, and then slowly as you go, you see she's finding her feet. So you give her more and more of that bottom rooting, that earthing to the ground. So she's not getting shocked by life anymore. And then you build to the song. So these are the kind of ideas that I kind of work with as I'm building the themes. And they're musical ideas. They're not abstract ideas. They're actually like very strongly musical ideas. They're things that you write in the music. And that's really what excites me about score, is the part of where you're part of the storytelling,
right?
And you are adding layer by layer another line to the script, but in a musical way. So it's a different language, but it's the same story,
right? So, but when you're working on something which is like Ratrani, I think you had very little time to create this entire the compositions. What happens if you run into a creative block at any point of time, and you have deadlines? So we are constantly basically working against time.
Yeah, I just work through it. I bash on regardless. So the thing is, composition is actually a deep dive. So it's like diving for pearls, right? So you dive, and sometimes you come up and you open the shell and there's no pearl inside. So you go back and you dive back in, So the only way, the obstacle is the way, So the only way is actually through it. You get back in there and you dive, and you dive till you find the pearl. I'll be dead honest with you. None of us would be doing this if we didn't love the process.
Yeah.
But the truth is, we love the process, and it's madness, and it's nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes it happens in a second. So that's the nature of the game. So
right. But is there anything in this process or in the way that we function in post or in music specifically? Is there something you'd change if you had a chance to change it?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think, oh God. Yeah, for sure. There's so much, actually. There's so much. I think the first thing I would change is I would change the way that we line up our teams. Like, I would first and foremost, I would almost always have a post-production meeting where I would call everyone and introduce everyone to everyone and kind of open channels of communication, so that even small montages, small ideas, whatever can be shared, is shared on a platform where we can all start seeing the same stuff, and once you see that, then I think then the ideas start flowing a lot better. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, I think overall, I just think that with, in terms of score, it's too much of A for Apple. It's too much of it. So I think there needs to be some more awareness in the business of how music storytelling works. And maybe we should do that. We should do that for especially for producers, especially for platforms and platform executives. There needs to be some sort of awareness of what music can do. Like, for example, the score of Squid Game is so adventurous for a show of that nature. The reason why they can be that adventurous is because the show itself is quite insane.
Yeah.
But the music actually plays it almost emotionally. It's not trying to play the horror of the situation. It's actually trying to cue the humanity. So it's very interesting how they've gone in the opposite direction. Rather than, okay, my God, this is so horrific, and oh my God, look at it, cool, it's so cool, they're so cool. They're not looking at that at all. They're looking at it from a very human perspective, and that's why the show works, because of the fact that they're not concerned. They're concerned with the human aspect of it. They're not concerned with trying to be cool. Whereas in India, I think there's this kind of Tarantino, Guy Ritchie, Tarantino.
That's the extent of cool that we aspire to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are very, very cool users of music.
Yeah.
Like Nicholas Winding Refn uses music sensationally. Gaspar Noé uses music sensationally. Kieslowski's usage of score was absolutely incredible. And even commercial filmmakers, like we just talked about the Russos, or Spielberg. Absolutely amazing use of music and design.
So
like
actually,
Saving Private Ryan, that opening scene of Saving Private Ryan is a masterclass. It's a masterclass in design.
Yeah. So it's actually just the coolness in the usage of it rather than just the sound of it.
Absolutely. In context.
Yeah. Right. That makes a lot of sense. I think I hear you on all of this. And I thank you so much for taking out time for this session. I think this is a very important conversation that we were able to have. And I hope whoever's listening is also able to get some really valuable insights from this.
It's just been an absolute pleasure. So thank you for having me on. And we can carry on and on.
Yeah, I
know. All good things must end.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Ram.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Antara.
If you enjoyed this video, then please like it, share it, comment on it, and subscribe to this channel so you're tuned in for our upcoming episodes.